there's anyone who's interested in providing a public comment today, if you could let us know, you could raise your hand or unmute yourself and let us know. Not hearing anyone so far. We'll make another call for it after we do roll call.
Commissioner, I don't see Commissioner Briscoe yet.
Okay, we will wait to get started a couple more minutes here.
We're texting him to make sure he's not having problems.
Have you close out, but you're welcome to stay as long as you want.
Okay.
Like there won't be anybody here, but they don't lock the doors until the cleaning guy comes in.
Lake Chelan last weekend.
Oh, that is just ingenious.
Ken, do you see this?
Really? Did you do that yourself?
He's running the weed eater and slipped.
No, I've been doing my own. I've been doing my own since COVID.
No comment. No.
You don't have to. I hear it from everybody else.
Okay, Commissioner Shepard, I think we're ready to roll.
All right, this is Port of Bellingham Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, October 6, 2020. We continue to operate under a Whatcom County public health emergency. In accordance, there are two ways to participate in the meeting. We've got a conference dial-in and a Zoom link, both available on our webpage. I'm going to start by closing our executive session and opening the public meeting with our roll call. Commissioner Briscoe.
Here.
Commissioner Bell.
Present.
And Commissioner Shepard is here as well. All three commissioners are present. We start with public comment. We already asked once to see if anyone was interested in providing public comment. So we'll make another ask here. See if anyone's interested. Not hearing any. We will have a second opportunity for public comment. In the meantime, while we're waiting, just to give everyone one more chance, I'm going to read our advisory committee meeting schedule for upcoming advisory committees. The first is the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee. That's the TAC and the BIAC. Next meeting is Thursday, October 8th, 2020 at 4 p.m. That will be via Zoom. We also have the Marine Advisory Committee, or the MAC, Tuesday, October 13th, 2020 at 6 p.m., also via Zoom. One last ask for public comment. Going once, going twice, and we'll move on to our consent agenda, please, Carrie.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through H.
All right. Are there any questions or comments? Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
Commissioner Bell?
I have none.
And I have none either. So Carrie, if you please.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through H.
All right. Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
And Commissioner Bell?
Yes, I muted myself.
And Commissioner Shepard's a yes as well. Carries 3-0 and moves us on to our presentation schedule. Looks like we are first up for an I-5 corridor infrastructure data collection project, and Jennifer Novak.
Hi, this is Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development. I'm going to introduce Jennifer and the project real quickly.
Great.
So when I began my role here approximately 3 years ago, one of the first things I noticed was that the region didn't have a large professional business park where there are CC&Rs, large streets, standards, setbacks, things of that nature. And then I realized why, and that was because we didn't have the infrastructure to build those business parks. And then over the following year or two, I of course, got heavily involved with my team on housing and the lack of housing for supporting businesses. So we decided to do this I-5 corridor study. Jennifer took the lead on that. She also wrote the narrative to the report, and she's here today to go over an abbreviated presentation on what we found.
I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Okay, so before we started, I just wanted to remind you which project this was. I think the last time that we were here updating you about it was about a year ago, maybe a little more. What this project is essentially, the overall project is really an infrastructure and utilities GIS database. And the reason we undertook this project, some of them outlined by Don, are pretty numerous. But the first and most important reason is that no consolidated GIS database of utilities and infrastructure in Whatcom County existed prior to this. So some of the cities and some of the jurisdictions have their own GIS databases, and you can go to that city and look at their public maps. But if you, for example, wanted to look at a property that's on the border of a UGA and the county, you'd have to go to both the county and that city and hope that that parcel was available publicly. So that's the number one reason. The other reasons are really about aligning priorities and making sure that we're using our funding and our remaining lands in the most effective and efficient and responsible way possible. So we have many large infrastructure projects on the SEDS project list, hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure projects. And, you know, we really need to make sure that any utilities or infrastructure we're adding is really the most efficient and best use. And I think with our reduced revenue and budgets due to COVID, aligning between jurisdictions on utility and infrastructure development is going to be even more critical.
Jennifer, if I could interrupt you, is SEDS Community Economic Development Study? What's the
Yep. So
acronym?
SEDS is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. It's an EDA document that's required, for example, for our revolving loan fund and for access to many forms of federal funding. Our team's actually updating the SEDS report this year for 2020. What that really does is kind of gives our group its own work plan for the next 5 years, but also, makes it more programmatic and strategic. And the project list is related to our EDI funding, right? So any project that has to be on this list in order to be eligible for EDI funding in Whatcom. So lots of overlapping uses there. The other three reasons Don referred to, as you all know, we have limited buildable lands remaining in Whatcom County. So more than half of the county is public land, right? A lot of that is federal, state lands, national parks. And that means we have about 500,000 acres for all other uses, residential, industrial, commercial. And given the number of critical areas, wetlands, habitats in the county, the number of those lands for residential and industrial development are limited. So we need to use them in a really efficient way. And then the last two are related, ongoing housing crisis and the high cost of land. One of the things that we can do as public agencies is to, and as part of our mission statement, is to manage our publicly owned lands and facilities to benefit the county. Right now, a lot of those lands are really expensive. And so one of the ways that we can think about development is how can we make some of this land more shovel ready, right? To make it more appealing to developers. And one of the ways we can do that is by infrastructure and utility development. So we got lots of deliverables from this project. We hired Flow Analytics, who's doing the port's overall GIS work, but we also hired them on a separate contract for this specific project. We have 6 main deliverables related to this, and they're all different tools for us to use. So there is a full report. It's very technical that describes the data collection process, how we looked at the gaps, and then also how we developed the parcel inventory, as well as the fieldwork cut sheets that I will be previewing for you. So each of these should be available for your use now, but we are updating the web map and the data actually now. So I would say that the web map hopefully will be available and updated by the end of this year, January 2021. So what did we do? The first thing we did was establish a study area. So any jurisdiction can be added to the overall database, but we did a study within that of a parcel inventory of lands that were specifically around the I-5 corridor. So in this area, we're really interested only on residential and industrial land. The other factors that we added in here were it had to be within about 10 miles of I-5, and we really just had to select some areas of focus to stay within our initial budget. So as you can see here, these sub areas are outlined in blue. So in the appendices, for example, there's a whole series of maps. So even if you don't really know how to use GIS, you can go into the appendix and look at all the Birch Bay maps that were produced by Flow for us. And they're very detailed. And each of these jurisdictions were solicited for data. And then we also obtained other public information and public data from FEMA, WashDOT, ecology, on things like wetlands and critical areas. Now we ended up with a series of also utility maps for each of the jurisdictions. So the map on the left here is wet utilities, so water, sewer, and storm water. On the right is dry utilities, and here that's electric, transmission, and fiber. So we can start to see that, now we actually can see some of the areas of overlap and some of the dead areas as well. And like I said, there's detailed maps for each of the sub areas. So if you wanted to really, really narrow it down and look in those sub area maps, you'll get a much better quality than this. So another really important piece that we did was our team sat down and we said, what are the variables or the factors that we think makes a property very developable or most easy to develop? And using those variables, essentially what we did was look at parcels that were residential or industrially zoned. For industrial parcels, they had to be larger than 3 acres or total up to 3 acres. And then what we said was, okay, using these factors, how easy or expensive might it be to develop? Now this is completely subjective, right? It's really a way for us to kind of organize the parcels and characterize them, right? So the variables are going to kind of that you use for this might be different depending on a different user, what a different user values.
So Jennifer, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Was there any discussion about urban growth areas and where those might be expanded? And by that same token, any discussion about how changing the zoning in certain locations would change the dynamic?
Yes. So one of the key factors for a property being developable. So for example, if a city of Blaine official was looking at this map, the number one factor of is a parcel developable is it in the UGA, right? So if it was a private developer, maybe that wouldn't matter as much. That would just tell them who they needed to work with. Do they need to work within the UGA or do they work within the county? So that is a factor for overall developability ranking, if UGA or not. One thing that we did not look at was, for example, we didn't run any scenarios where we assumed there was more properties within the UGA than currently are within the UGA. But that's something we could definitely think about for the future.
Did it envision the properties that are currently within the UGA being annexed?
Yes, so it can tell us anything that's within the current UGA. What it can tell us in this particular example is the sort of added value to adding infrastructure to those parcels and within the annexation area, for example. So in this example for Blaine, we can see that the grayed out parcels are not included, right? So either they're already over 50% utilized, or they're too small, or they're incorrectly zoned. So what we end up with is a lot of these properties out here are light green, and that means sort of low ranked, maybe they're going to be harder to develop. And intuitively, this makes sense, right? As you go to the east, a lot of those parcels start to lose connectivity to utilities, the roads get smaller, it gets more heavily wooded, and this area of Blaine is more heavily forested, right? So in this scenario, what we do is assume water, electric, sewer, and fiber. And it changes the map to this. So you can see a lot of those light green properties that were low ranked are now mid ranked. And then some, we even have this dark blue color, which is highly developable. So by just adding these 4 utilities, we're making, 20 acres of what was highly developable land into 178, right? And for mid-ranked, the gains are even bigger, right? 119 acres to 849 acres. So we can start to see some of the gains by just adding in some basic infrastructure to these parcels.
Jennifer, how do we distinguish what lands are currently in operation for farming? Are we considering, my concern with this is just because land is maybe not built out but it's being farmed, does that put it into a category that if we bring utilities, we're going to diminish our capability of having a robust amount of farmland to feed our county and to keep those important jobs activated?
That's a great question. So one of the things we did to make sure that we, followed the county's comprehensive plan commitment to maintaining the 100,000 active acres of farmland was to exclude all agriculturally zoned lands from the study. So any parcel that's already agriculturally zoned is not going to be in one of these in these development categories at all. It's completely excluded. However, when we gave this presentation to the planners, which we did just last week, the watershed planner informed me of this thing I had never heard of called the rural study areas. Now, this is about 28,000 acres of farmland that's not actually currently zoned agricultural. So it's at risk for being developed. Now, one of the things that we're going to do on the update is make sure we incorporate that data into the update. And, he just eyeballed the maps and said, there were about 3,000 acres around Ferndale and about 8,000 acres west of I-5. So once we incorporate that data, we'll be sure to make sure that 100,000 acres at least is excluded from this.
Do you know if tree farming, so kind of lands that are set aside for that type of agricultural use, does that factor into that, what we consider agricultural use in that 100,000 acres?
So that's something that I can talk with the county planners about and with the city planners if it's the same zoning or if it's a different zoning that we might need to consider.
It's actually different zoning, Jen, but but we only, Commissioner Shepherd, we only included industrial and residential zone properties. So even forestry zone properties, we didn't even look at.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And, related to that, there are a lot of other factors, right, that will make certain parcels, from someone's perspective, very developable or not developable at all. Again, one of the planners said, well, I saw this parcel in the cut sheet and it's on the coast, so I'm not sure if that's really highly developable or not. So, there are some of these variables that we're still adding in. And so we definitely welcome, as the port is a major, industrial landholder, any feedback you guys have on variables you think should be included for this developability. And because it's GIS, the beauty of it is we can always add more layers of any type of data we want, right? Sort of our imaginations and I guess our budgets are the limit, but we can really do a lot with it. And this is really just the first start, right? So I also wanted to show you one other piece of deliverables. So right now we have 171 parcel cut sheets. So each cut sheet is sort of organized in two parts. The top half has an aerial photo and then a fieldwork photo, if there's one available. In this case, there's not, because the photo would just be of trees. The bottom half of the cut sheets have a lot of information, including a lot of the variables that we used in order to create these ranks, right? So is I-5 visible from the property? Are there buildings on the property? Is it vacant? Where are the utilities, for example? And now one of the other interesting things about this is that, again, we can change this to what's important for the user. So for example, if the cities wanted to use these cut sheets when they get leads, one of the things we can add to these is contact information for who owns the property. So again, a lot of flexibility in how we use these and who uses them. So going forward, there's lots of, like I said, there's lots of ways to use this information. I think one of our biggest hopes is to evaluate planning and public works policies and projects. And really to, again, coordinate the sort of most efficient and effective placement of utilities that'll improve the greatest number of parcels, right? So we are being really efficient with our infrastructure spending. This can also be used to help us identify parcels that might be ideal for public investment, or ideal for P3 partnerships, or ideal for private investment, right? If we have a lead and we need to find a property, we can actually use this tool to search the properties. Staff can also use the data from this to support funding applications. So if we have curb applications or WSDOT applications, a lot of this data can be used to justify those projects. And the more it's used and the more data that we add, the more powerful it will become. So the next steps for this. So after discussions between the port and the county, we decided that the place that it made most sense for the database to live is County GIS. And we will, so our team will be involved with sort of the regular updating and maintenance of the database. And the first update and maintenance that will happen this year, our team will be paying for and coordinating. And we'll be starting that this week. So that's exciting. And like I said, hopefully all of this will be available for use by the end of the year, and for sure by January 2021. So very exciting. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Sure.
So maybe I missed it in here, but availability of water is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So in your database, is the water availability ranked by area, or if water is available in that area?
So right now it only shows utility access. So for example, if someone's going to have to use a well on that property. That's something that is not here. If you're referring to water availability in terms of, for metered usage or non-metered usage, that's something that we, I think, need to think about how to integrate, particularly as it's relevant to residential and industrial users. Remember, agricultural users are excluded from this, and agricultural parcels are excluded. But just the presence right now, it's just the presence or absence of water that is included in this, not necessarily rights to water, for example.
Commissioner
because a lot of these places are on water. Oh shoot, I was there. Go ahead, Don. I lost what I was saying.
Well, what I was going to say is, yes, if we were told by the municipality that there were pipes in the road, we did include that, but we did not include the sizing of them. We're hoping that as the planners from each municipality start to integrate this into their process of development, that every time there's an update, when they get a permit to build a building and some developer puts in a new pipe, they will actually integrate that into the system, and they'll show the exact size of the pipe and where it is. So this is the baseline, but the only way this works is by all the planners in the county start updating the information as it becomes available.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of water associations in the county, and there, some of them aren't very big. Some of them are, like you got the Birch Bay Water Association. We're on a water association, Kickerville Road. There's water associations all over out here. And I know our water association is pretty well maxed out, and there's still a lot of property around us that probably could be built on. So I think there needs to be included in the database, how much water is, if water, or how much water is available, and if it's an association, because it isn't just pumped out by the city or the county, where it's all these little water associations with little tanks in the woods somewhere that, and a lot of water in that North Canada that you have up on the screen in this particular area, it comes from Canada. So those kind of things probably need to be in there, so people are looking for property, they can, how comfortable they are they with their long-term water supply.
I think, and that's a great point, especially for the residential properties, because we're looking at trying to, make these properties and buildings affordable, right? So having access to enough water for enough of those units is going to be really important, in addition to obviously industrial users potentially needing a lot. Any other?
That's all I have. Thanks.
Was there any discussion about single family homes versus, condo and apartments?
That's a good question. So we looked at residential zoning generally. We didn't compare, for example, multifamily versus single family zoning. But that's something we could do in the future, right? So if we, for example, wanted to compare how developable the properties that are currently zoned single family are versus how developable the properties that are currently zoned for multifamily use. That's definitely something we could do just by adding in that zoning.
I'd love to see that. Just anecdotally, what I'm seeing is that single family homes are the commodities going up in price fastest, because that's what people want to buy. And so they're driving the price up, and they're moving from, condos into single family homes. So my take on that is, if we should look at that mix and see what mix is an appropriate balance. If we're not going to put any more single family homes, all that's going to do is drive up the price of the current ones. And it's going to put people out of those single family homes all over the city and into condos, which may not be as desirable.
And Mr. Bell, it's also causing people to move from the Bellingham region into the outlying areas, because that's where more single family homes are being built. And
damn strict. That's absolutely right. And it's one of the reasons why I'm looking at the urban growth areas, is because there's plenty of room and infrastructure to do some of that. And we should be looking at that mix.
I will add that to my list of data to add in. So when we ask for the jurisdictions to update the data, I'll ask them to make sure they include both single family and multifamily residential. That'll be.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Is there any data out there that documents sites that may have historical contamination or brownfields? One of the things that ports have been successful, or different jurisdictions, is working with the Department of Ecology to bring in state money to do a cleanup and then put that property into an affordable housing project. And the Department of Ecology is signaling that they're very interested in these types of projects. That's why we're seeing so much interest in the millworks development at the waterfront. And I've had some conversations with Brian just about how do we track where other brownfield sites are, both whether they're in the city limits of Bellingham or elsewhere in the county. So we're able to try and prioritize ways that the port can bring some of their best strengths. We've got a dynamite team that works on these environmental cleanups. And if we're able to combine that with ability to construct housing, we really meet two needs that we have in our community.
Yeah, so I think that there's a few options for how to do this. So one option would be, for example, for me to sit down with Greg and Brian and for us to actually go over the port parcels that the port owns and identify which ones we already know are MACA sites or are brownfields or are cleanup sites of other sorts. But there is some state level data on brownfields, so we could certainly add that data into here. And then when we're looking at the web map, one of the layers that you could then select to say, okay, I want to see all of the port properties that are zoned industrial and that are currently brownfields. And
I think that would be really useful. And Brian did allude that there was a state inventory that exists, but that we were kind of struggling to coalesce that in one location. So for me, that would make this a really useful tool and give us some a good resource to be able to make some actionable decisions on.
So
yeah, I agree with that. And I think that one of the original, another sort of original cause of this project was just driving down I-5 and seeing brownfields visibly from the road, right? Which, you know, those are prime pieces of property to develop if they're within visibility of I-5, right? So that's definitely something that we can add in and do additional analysis on.
GIS base layer for the whole region. There's enormous amounts of new data that we can keep on adding and layering. And most importantly, as Jennifer was saying, it allows multiple jurisdictions to plan together rather than each jurisdiction doing independent planning and not working with each other. So each one of these things that you're mentioning is just a data source that we can create a whole nother GIS layer on.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Briscoe, did you have another question?
Yeah, the power. I've talked about the water, now I'd like to talk about the power.
Yeah,
you know, we keep hearing rumblings that you know, we're short on power, and we keep talking about the utilities that are going by here. Well, they might go by there, but can you get enough power? Is the power companies been included in this? Their information going to be put into this, or what's going to be available in the future? What they feel is going to be available?
Yeah. So we did get the power companies to participate, both the PUD and PSC, and actually some of the transmission companies. So they required NDAs to get that data. So we had, fortunately, because Flo did this for us, Flo can sign the NDAs and we were able to get the data through them. However, what that means is we don't have exact data in terms of capacity of transmission lines. We just have information about approximately where they are within the buffer zone. So a lot of that specific data has to be hidden because it's proprietary data. So right now, again, it's a presence or absence, but does not necessarily, you would still need to contact the jurisdiction and say, I'm this type of user and I need this much power. Can you do it? Great question.
So I guess in essence, what you said was you've got to call up the power company if you want to buy that piece of property that we know is available and say, hey, can you give me power and can I have this much for the future? And that's the only, you're going to have to dig the answer out of them, correct?
Out of them or out of the city. Ideally, we would have a little bit more information on the power to the parcel. But what this, again, this is really presence or absence of the utilities. And part of that is because there's variation among the jurisdictions on how they do these things, right? So in order to have a consolidated database, it's more, is it there or not? And then you can look at some additional details. For example, even though it's not capacity of the water pipes, for example, is not something in this study. When you look at the web map, if you select a specific parcel, it will tell you even, what the pipe is made of if that jurisdiction collected the data. So part of this is just some of our data collection at this point is still, pretty minimal because data collection is time consuming.
Yeah. So at some point in time, do you see the data being available if someone wants to get into this database? They find a parcel they're interested in. They can pursue. There's links or whatever to pursue to the people they need to ask those pertinent questions to. You see, is that going to be working into that?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're hoping to have the end user, both for internal uses for agencies and for private developers and private citizens.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this one? All right, hearing none, thank you very much, Dawn and Jennifer, appreciate it. Next up is Bellingham Shipping Terminal 2020 Condition Assessment and Jennifer Allen. If you're speaking to us, you're muted.
No, I'm sorry. I was double muted, so it took me a second to unmute myself. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my name is Jennifer Allen. I am an engineering project manager at the Port of Bellingham. The 5-year condition assessment was recently completed at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal by Moffett and Nickel, and we wanted to provide a brief update to Commission on the findings of the assessment. As you may recall, the Bellingham Shipping Terminal is subdivided into 3 separate terminal areas. We have the South Terminal, the Central Terminal, and the North Terminal. In general, the condition assessment noted expected deterioration with a few exceptions in each terminal that I'll touch on. So for the South Terminal area, South Terminal was constructed in the 1960s, predominantly using timber materials that would include timber pile cap, laminated timber decking beneath 4 inches of asphalt. In general, the South Terminal is in fair condition. Some of the repairs recommended in the condition assessment included replacing approximately 2,000 square feet of laminated timber decking and asphalt. And this photo in the bottom left corner shows some water damage and rot in the South Terminal decking, replacing 2 structural pile and repairing piles with major splits, repairing stringers, and repairing some of the fender systems. These recommendations were largely consistent with the recommendations from the 2015 condition assessment, with the exception of the timber decking repairs. In the Central Terminal was actually ranked in serious condition. Central Terminal was constructed in 1991 using steel and concrete materials. The Central was rated in serious condition due to some damage sustained to the concrete panels during rock loading operations. The damage was identified in 2019. Other repair recommendations included the installation of fiberglass jackets and repairs to the fendering system. With the exception of the concrete decking, similar repairs were noted in the 2015 condition assessment. So for the north terminal was constructed in 1960 and a portion was constructed in the 80s. The north terminal was constructed with steel pile over a concrete deck and then timber structural piles over a concrete deck. In general, the north terminal is also in fair condition with recommended repairs consisting of replacing structural piles, timber stringers, and timber fender components. So the number of piles for replacement did increase from the 2015 condition assessment, but the recommendations would be consistent with degradation you would see over time with timber components. We have requested that Moffett and Nickel provide a scope and fee for design and permitting for the recommended repairs outlined in the condition assessment. Due to permitting constraints, construction for these repairs would likely span 2 in-water work windows for completion in 2023. Thank you for the opportunity to present this update. Are there any questions on the condition assessment?
The damage to the deck, did I hear you say that was due to the recent rock moving across there? Or was it prior to that?
Mm-hmm. No, it was the rock loading operation.
Okay. And so do we have a suggested path of repair on that? And do we know what that is?
We do. Yeah, we will actually be replacing the recommended repair at this point is replacing the deck panels.
And what will
we are not, we have not, pardon me?
What material will be replaced with, or will it be the same material?
Replaced in kind.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And do we have any recourse?
I didn't ask that question because I knew you'd come with it, Kim.
You're welcome.
This is Rob. Let me jump in here. I believe we do. I believe and Dave Warder, if you're on the line, please jump in as well. But I believe the barge company has acknowledged they did the damage and that we'll be negotiating a settlement with them.
Yes, that is correct, Rob. This is Dave Warder, Terminal Manager. That is correct. McCamus is fully aware of the different components and damage, and they are aware. And once we get the repairs done, we will be billing them for those repairs.
So, Dave, I have a question. Is that dropping rocks? Is that the rock damage created from the rock weight or dropping of a rock?
As I wasn't there the entire time and they're loading, but for the most part, I think it's the crane operator sitting in his position as he's picking up that rock may not have it up off the deck far enough. And so when he picks it up and he swings it, it's making contact with the pier.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
I have nothing else either. Thanks, Jennifer. That was great. By the way, everything from 1960 and older tends to show wear. Ask me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm looking pretty good.
That's a matter of opinion.
I have mirror on the wall.
Ken, right there.
Right?
Okay, well, I don't have any further questions. Everything I had was answered there. Thank you for that update. Any further questions? Going once, going twice. Moving on. All right, Jennifer, looks like you're not going very far, and we are doing a Gate 1 float replacement update.
Yep. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to do something better. Okay, so gate 1 float replacement. Can you still see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so for the gate 1 float replacement, so once again, I'm Jennifer Allen, project engineer at the Port of Bellingham. We recently completed the design for this gate 1 float repair or float and gangway replacement project and wanted to provide an update to commission on the status of the project. So to provide some background, the float and piling at gate 1 are some of the older timber structures in the Outer Harbor. In 2018, port staff identified to replace the pile, float, and metal gangway. Staff members applied for and received 2 grants to replace the structures. In early 2019, we did issue a request for professional services for the design and permitting of the new float, pile, and gangway. Reed Middleton was the sole respondent. During the design phase of this work, we did discover that sedimentation had occurred near the bulkhead area, which raised the mudline elevation by approximately 2 feet. So to meet current design standards, we did have to push the float out by about 12 feet. However, the overall length of the float itself did decrease by 10 feet. Due to permitting constraints and grant restrictions, the floating gangway will be replaced this year. The existing pump out equipment, which was recently replaced, will be salvaged and reinstalled on the new float. The piling will need to be replaced in the future. As I noted earlier, the initial design, permitting, and construction effort was funded through grants from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Washington State Department of Parks and Recreation. The project is currently out to bid and will close tomorrow. The float and gangway construction needs to be complete by the end of this work window. And thank you for the opportunity to present. Are there any questions?
I have one. So do we have a condition assessment on the piling, Jennifer?
We do, yes. The piling, we got a condition assessment on both the piling and the bulkhead. And we know that the bulkhead right around the gangway connection will support the weight of the new gangway, and the pile itself can also support the new float.
So what's our condition at the seabed level of the piling? Did they speak to that?
They did not give me an elevation of the mud line at the piling.
Can you go back to that?
Out for you, though.
Can you go back to the picture of the float, please?
Yeah.
The one that's in the water?
Yeah.
See if I can zoom that on my screen here. Do we know when those piling were driven?
You know, I think they were driven in approximately the 60s, but I would have to, 60s or earlier. I can confirm that date for you, though.
Yeah, because that was originally the Coast Guard dock. They kept their 41 footers there, 41 or 44 footers. As always, my concern is we've got people that are working on things, doing things. They're going to put a new dock in there. I don't know why we don't. It's 2 piling. Why we don't replace the piling at that point in time, so we don't have to go out to bid and have something else done and spend some more money when we can probably do everything at once. I can't imagine 2 pilings is that terrific a cost. Maybe somebody else can jump in here and give me some numbers on that, but I would question why we're not doing everything.
It was really more of a permitting restriction rather than a funding restriction. If we were to permit everything all at once, permitting would take approximately 2 years, and we do need to complete this construction by February 15 in order to get those grant funds. So it was a permitting constraint in conjunction with the grant deadline.
Brian, are you on here? Is Brian here anywhere?
In the lull, permitting would take 2 years.
Yeah, we're finding anything to do in
Yeah.
the water with NMFS is really, really slow these days. We've had these conversations before. You guys authorized another employee at WPPA to try and break this log jam, but by no means has it been broken yet.
So it needs to.
Ken, I thought 2 year was aggressive unless you're operating under nationwide permits that could accelerate through the agencies. If you're having to get an individual permit, I'd extend that time period.
Yeah, that just tells you where we are. 2 years on.
So this would fall under a maintenance project because it's in replacement effectively. So we would fall under nationwide number 3, but Jennifer's correct that we have been experiencing significant delays because installing new piles would trigger a consultation from National Marine Fisheries, and that's where our bottleneck is.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And that you're going to, even with a nationwide permit, it's a consultation with the agencies. That'll be a slow process. And it's not focused on this port or just ports in general. It's a problem through the NIMS and the various agencies positioning themselves against each other, plus potential tribal consultations.
Okay, so I guess my next question is this: Greg, you could probably answer this. We're jacketing wooden piles under some of our other docks, right?
For the most part, no, we're not. Most of the piles that we're jacketing are steel. The other thing to keep in mind on pile jacketing is that you're kind of relying on the fact that those piles are still in sound condition. And these have deteriorated to the point where jacketing them would likely not be a viable option.
Right.
So we're really just phasing this project in order to get the work done in time to meet the grant requirements, and then we'll.
No, I get that. I get that part of it. I understand that. I'm trying to figure out how we're supposed to fix things. If you got a boat tied up in a southeasterly wind that's totally sideways and we snap piling off, how do we fix them? Are we in the same process in that case? If the piling snaps off, we got to wait 2 years to fix it?
There's a high likelihood that you'd be able to consider that an emergency, and you might be able to expedite that. But it's kind of the bind that we're in with these permitting delays that we're dealing with. And we are working with WPPA and PNWA to try to resolve those issues.
Okay, very good. Didn't mean to drag this out, but I struggle with not being able to do the whole job. I hate doing part of a job because it costs way more money. So
no going over there with your boat and knocking those pilings over, Bobby.
I'm going to go get one right away.
Creating your own emergency. Jennifer, does our grant funding pay for the entirety of this project?
If bids come back within the construction estimate, we will be within the grant. If they are over, then we will not know.
Okay.
But we won't know until tomorrow.
Okay, great.
So that poses another question for me. If we come back and the bids are above our grant funding, and Rob, you'll probably be answering this one. Are we prepared to move forward still with this project and make up the difference, or where are we at on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the difference would be substantial enough to stop the project. That being said, I'd like to reserve judgment until we do see what the bids are, but I think we'll be okay, yeah.
Okay, very good, because I don't want to see the project stop. Anyways, very good. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on this one? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Our next presentation is Security Access Control System, and Pam Taft.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Pam Taft, Special Projects Administrator for Marinas. I'm really happy to be giving you this update today on our new security access control system. We've been talking about it for a couple years, and finally in December of 2019, we entered into a contract with All Access Data and Security to purchase an access control system for Blaine and Squalicum harbors. And the system replaced the hardware that was already installed on the doors to the showers, laundry, and restroom facilities, and the gates to the docks. So we put together a team of port folks to work together on this project, and the team consisted of marinas, the port electricians, and the maintenance folks, and the IT department. So starting in January of this year, the team met several times, and we began planning, coordinating, and ordering the hardware and beginning prep for the installation. And in the meantime, we emailed and mailed letters to our customers, updating them on the project, as well as offering them a chance to specify their preference in type of credential. And by credential, I mean Prox card or key fob. So those were their options. And we had a pretty good response. We got about 75%, heard back from 75% of the customers that we contacted. And in the end, ended up programming and mailing over 3,000 credentials to our customers. So overall, we feel that this project was successful. The team worked really well together. And although there were some challenges with the onset of COVID, the communication and coordination between Marina's maintenance, IT, and the supplier was really good, and we were able to keep this project moving forward. And in July of this year, we went live in both harbors. And so we kept the codes in place until the end of August to make sure our customers had enough time to get their new credentials and they weren't completely locked out of the facility. And with any big rollout, we did anticipate that there would be some growing pains, but really we only had minor tweaks and adjustments that needed to be done to the system. And we're really happy with how smooth the transition was overall and the little impact it was to our customers. Since the system has been in place, we've had a significant drop in reported vandalism and graffiti. And we've gotten some really good feedback from our customers on the system. To give you an idea, some of the comments we received, the showers are a lot cleaner, a noticeable decrease in the number of unauthorized people on the docks. They appreciate the increased security of the facility. Also, there has been fewer needles found as well. And at our last MAC meeting, a couple of the MAC members shared that they've also received positive feedback from the customers that they talked to on the docks. One more thing to mention is that there is an app for a smartphone that will be available in the near future, but we want to make sure the system is fully functional and any bugs worked out before it's released to the customers. So that is our update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
What future plans do we have for more security since Qualicum is still having some serious issues?
So, Commissioner, I'll jump in on that one if that's all right. We've put an additional security guard during the graveyard shift in the harbor. I believe that's been noticed. The police are doing additional patrols through the harbor. We've seen that, both hearing people comment on that and also seeing that in our video review of the evenings. So we're seeing definitely a greater police presence there. And then our engineering team is working on gates that'll be locked kind of during the graveyard shift. That's in process, and probably two different gates. I think we've identified two different places to kind of shut off the access to the web lockers, if you will.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Pam.
Just real quick, have you seen any change, any shift with the mission moving its drop-in center more towards the east side of town and away from the waterfront? Has that had any impact at all?
I don't believe it has. I don't know if Alan or Kyle have seen something different, or Pam, but I don't believe it's seen. No, we still see the campers down here. You're still seeing some overnighters on port property.
Yeah, I would agree with Rob as well. I don't see any, we haven't really noticed any difference with the drop-in center moving down. It's just an attractive area with, showers they were able to get into and restroom facilities. Now that those have been potentially reduced or taken away from them, since they can't gain an access code, we'll hopefully see some of those moving on.
And no increase in vandalism because of that?
Say again, Commissioner. I didn't quite get the question.
No increase in vandalism because of that?
I don't believe we've seen an increase in vandalism now.
Okay.
No.
All right.
I see more movement in the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park area at late night. Work fairly late into the evenings, and I see more of those homeless folks, or however you want to categorize them, running around over here. So I think this is probably going to be one of our next areas of issue here. Do we have any camera stuff over here? Have we got any surveillance over here in this site at all?
I don't believe FMIP has any surveillance. I think we looked at a gate solution there. I'm not sure if that was ever implemented, so we could certainly dig that up. And then we could also look at the camera system over there. We certainly have the connectivity to do it.
Yeah, the only gate we've got is up on the road coming down. Oh, shoot. The hill towards the old wooden building over there. But
yeah,
tremendous amount of people roll through here and are using the beach. And we walk out through the weeds here across the railroad tracks and are using the beach. So I'm sure we're going to have more issues in the future than we do here now.
Well, we'll dig out the plans for those gates, and because I think that'll help. There'll be one way access in and not the other way. So,
yeah, my concern is basically the lawsuit activity stuff that we end up with over people that can't look where they're walking or whatever the case is. So, all right, thank you, Pam.
And Rob, what kind of vandalism are we seeing most in Squalicum right now that it's prompted the extra security?
It wasn't vandalism, it was theft. And we saw a truck stolen. We saw a boat on a trailer just be hooked up to our car and leave. We had some crabbing gear that was stolen, and then I think another vehicle as well. So, a trailer. I'm sorry, we had an independent trailer, a trailer and a boat, crabbing gear, and then the truck that was stolen. So mostly theft. And I believe that, that's not even all of it. There was other theft that was not reported to me.
Okay. And this doesn't sound like it's on the docks, though. It sounds like it's in the
web blocker areas. Yeah, web blocker areas is where it primarily was occurring.
Okay. And do we have surveillance there? Do we have cameras in those locations? I know those are not always give us a great detail of what's happening.
Yeah, in the case of the trailer being stolen, it was caught on the video right at the entrance to Coho there. We've got a video camera that'll actually read a license plate, and we're able to get a plate number. The trailer itself, I'm not sure. The trailer and the boat, I'm not sure if we had good video for. But, at nighttime, it's really hard to read a plate on these things, but during the day, it's pretty easy.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I have none.
No, I just want to say thank you for the increased security. I think we need it.
Yeah, we'll keep that going as long as we need to. And then, like I said, when we get those gates installed, I think that's going to be kind of a game changer there. They'll be really hard to have access in there. And everything that's been stolen out of there requires a truck or a vehicle to pull it or take it out. So it's not like stuff is disappearing on foot.
All right. Well, thank you, Pam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next up, we have Port Climate Action Strategy, Adrian Hedgedus and Kurt Baumgarten.
Hello. Okay, you should be able to see a slide on its own, the presentation. Does that look okay?
We see 6 rocket ships.
Good. Okay. First of all, my name is Adrian Hedgedus. I'm an environmental specialist at the Port of Bellingham. I do want to thank my friend Carolyn Watson for this photo. I really like this photo. So I asked her if I could use it, and she said yes. So I do manage the sustainability program here at the Port of Bellingham, and that includes the climate action strategy. Kurt Baumgarten is also leading the efforts on that. So we will be giving you a brief presentation today. No action for you, but we do look forward to some discussion and some input at the end. We did give you a presentation in February of this year. And at that presentation, we gave you some starting information on a roadmap that we had done in late 2019 on planning for and mitigating climate change through actions that the port can take over the next short and long-term timeframes. So under commission direction, we are moving ahead with work on goal setting and the parallel processes needed for an inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions and infrastructure that may be at risk due to the effects of climate change. So you'll hear me talk about mitigation and adaptation. Again, there's sort of those two large buckets of ways that we're addressing climate change. Mitigation is reducing our emissions, and adaptation is adjusting and adapting for the future. Okay. And slides. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So the climate action strategy, just as a quick review again, is non-linear. So it is adaptive, it's iterative, it's circular, it's phased. There's different phases to it. And we're looking at that as, okay, phases are great because we can bite off smaller chunks, particularly from a budget perspective. So the phases that we're looking at for 2020, I'll talk about in a minute. And then we've got some set aside for 2021 as well. It's really important to emphasize that we really do need all of the divisions of the port and leadership to help us develop this strategy right from the start. I think that's the key, the biggest key to our success with this program. We do have a lot of expertise and experience within the port. And so creating that collaborative strategy that will both guide decisions and be evaluated over time is valuable. The port's climate action strategy is informed by the work done with the City of Bellingham and Whatcom County. For example, the Cosmos model, and Kurt's going to talk about that in more detail in a moment. And we're also informed by the work done by other members of the Washington Public Ports Association and ports outside the WPPA as well. So a recap of some of our current initiatives at the port. None of these are totally new. The solar array at BCT, our bids are closing October 12th. We're expecting construction to begin early January. I'd put Jennifer Allen up here again, but I think she's probably presented out today. We are also looking ahead to Green Direct starting up in Q1 of 2021, and that will be providing energy generated by solar and wind power for the bulk of the electricity provided by PSE to port-controlled meters. So not for the tenants at this point, just for the port-controlled meters. We also have a couple of hybrid vehicles in our fleet. We have an electric bike as of last year, and we, one of the silver linings of COVID is that we've reduced our commuting and our business travel greenhouse gases. So we showed you this the last time as well. This is from our roadmap from 2019. Obviously the timing has been delayed a little bit, but we're getting back on track. So we are really on the tasks and the phases where the stars are, you can see. So task 1, 2, and 3. We're moving ahead with our visioning and process with our greenhouse gas inventory and our alignment and our goal development tasks. So the vulnerability assessment of that second task there will be started with budget approval in 2021. And next up, Kurt Baumgarten is going to talk about one of our vulnerability assessment tools, the Cosmos model.
Jennifer, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Or Adrian, excuse me. When you made a comment, and I want to clarify it in my head, the Green Direct is not going to affect our tenants. Is that what? They're not going to benefit from that?
At this point, no. So when we were applying now 2+ years ago, we made the decision to look at the port meters. So the meters under PSE that for electricity that the port uses, just because the tenant use is a little bit more out of our control. And that seems to be fairly common as we, I was looking around at other people in the same boat with tenants. And it might be, yeah.
So this confuses me. We've got power coming into the port. Let's go just with in our harbors. We've got meters on all the docks. So the folks on the docks, the boaters on the docks won't benefit from the Green Direct program. I mean, how do we differentiate the power within the port and where it's going?
I think the boats would benefit from it, Commissioner, unless I have this wrong, but I believe that we pay that bill and then bill out all of our tenants based on our own meter readings to them, and that's not a meter reading that PSE comes in and does. I think what Adrian's referring to is tenants of the port that are more brick and mortar and have their own meters and pay PSE direct.
Oh, okay. So on our properties, they've got their own meter reading going on from Puget Power or whomever.
Sorry, Rob, that's actually not the case in this scenario. There are some tenants where we rebill to them. So we get the PSE bill and then we bill it back to the tenants. And it's definitely a case by case basis across the port on how that's managed. Like there might be sub-meters that we go in and read and then we rebill that tenant, or it might be that they're on a prorated basis. But it's something, Commissioner Briscoe, that we could definitely look at in the future. Part of the issue with Green Direct 2 is that it's a limited offering. So with the next phase that they offer, we could ask to expand to those meters that are more controlled by tenant activity.
Okay, so I want to make sure I got this straight now. We do have some people who will benefit from the Green Direct in the port. And we have some with the cases with their own meters that will not. Is that correct?
That's not what I'm hearing. I think we need to do a little more homework on this and get back to you on it, because that's not my understanding, especially when it comes to the harbors. So let us get back to you on that one if we can, Commissioner.
Yep, you bet. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Adrian.
A major, tenant like cold storage, Bellingham Cold Storage, they're an example. They bill directly to Bonneville or whoever they get their power from directly. And so they're not going to be participating in this, but all of any port building that we pay and use for like the cruise terminal, an example, that's a building, we pay the meter on that, and that will become part of the Green Direct.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm happy to go through the meters that we included in Green Direct and then share that information with you if you'd like, because we do have that very clear on which meters are which.
So did we pick and choose meters, Adrian? Did you go through and was that done by how many gigawatts or kilowatts or how wide is available, or how was that done?
That was done partly on the usage because they have to have a certain threshold of use before they were considered for Green Direct, and that's a PSE requirement. Okay. And some of them were, if it was entirely rebuilt to the tenant, the decision was made to not include them with the Green Direct offering. And so the Green Direct, the benefit to it, there's potentially a tiny financial benefit because they guarantee a rate moving forward. And generally that's not a guaranteed rate with PSE moving forward. And we kind of budget based on some assumptions, but there's probably real estate folks here who could speak better to that than I can. But the decision was made just because we don't control the tenant activities, we don't control whether or not they stay or go, to not include the bulk of those meters that are not controlled by the port itself. So you're right, where we have the bulk of the control of the building, like the cruise terminal, that's a good example, where the port uses about 70%, and Dave can chime in there too. And then 30% of it is by various tenants. So we included that one because the bulk of it was port controlled. Does that answer our question?
Yeah, no, that's fine, Adrian. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a process of elimination of what was. And then were we limited to how much power on the Green Direct side of things? Was there a cap that PSE was let us use, or how was that?
No, there wasn't a cap. It's just more that we wanted to start with that, and then we can expand later if we need to. So.
Okay. So is there another program has to come along, an offering to expand later?
Hopefully.
And that's what I was getting at. Was there a limitation this time on how much we could do?
There was no limit on this time. as far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
So if we wanted to bring an additional meter on, is that something we can just add, or do we have to wait for another Green Direct offering to add, say, 5 more meters on there?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. I can ask though. Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to me like if we could add, if we were at an unlimited to what we could add on, we'd try and get everything possible on there, unless I'm not thinking about this right.
Well, I know that when PSE is making the offerings, they're banking on a certain, we're investing in, say, new wind farms and solar farms and geothermal operations. And so those new projects that they're constructing with our participation are going to have some cap in the amount of power that they're able to produce. But as we continue to show demand, that continues to make a case for PSE to offer more of these. And I know with this Green Direct offering, it's sold out in, like 5 minutes. And we got in because folks like Adrian did a good job of making sure we were well seen and visible in being an application.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why the question arose in my. That's why the question arose in my mind: is was there a cap on it when they offered this Green Direct? Was there a cap?
Yeah, and we may have opportunity to expand because with the solar installation at the cruise terminal now, then we're kind of maybe able to trade in some more meters. I will ask and I will get back to you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Adrian. Good job. Thanks.
Okay, good evening. Kurt Baumgarten, Port Environmental Planner. And the part of this that I'm focused on as far as looking at, think of this as kind of port-wide resiliency initiative. And so what I'm looking at on this part is more of the adaptation component. And so last year, we entered into an interlocal with the city and the county to work on this coastal and storm modeling system, the Cosmos model. We don't have any outputs locally yet, but I thought that it would be helpful to kind of see what they've done down in California that we could expect here. And this is a web-based viewer. I just picked a bay that kind of had a few attributes similar to what we have in Bellingham. This is Bodega Bay in Northern California. And on the left-hand side of each screen, there's some menu options. In the top, you can pick, if you're looking at, flooding, wave heights, currents, and duration. And what we're looking at here is a predictive model on what the effects of sea level rise would be like for different scenarios looking out into the future. So it would be our sea level rise crystal ball, if you will. And so what I did was on the left, I picked, a scenario for flooding. I left it, at a current sea level, and then didn't have any storm. And so you can see you just have like a normal looking day on a shoreline there. On the right, I stuck with flooding. I put in an input of what approximately 5 feet of sea level rise would look like with a 100-year storm event. And so this is where the action happens, if you will, on, the port infrastructure. We get, several 100-year storms these days annually. And that's when we're going to see, the most erosion and the most stresses. And the 5 feet is, 60 inches. And that is, in the range of what we're seeing various jurisdictions planning for. So this is, and you can see the inundation levels here. It gives you a real clear picture. And if we were able to zoom in, you can get right down in and be able to see, what various structures and assets could be affected. So, in looking forward when it comes to, go ahead, Adrian, if you want to advance, please. In looking forward, when we were thinking about the next steps, Adrian mentioned that, as far as vulnerability and, risk assessment on assets, we'd be looking at that more next year. And that's, in part because we won't be seeing outputs from this modeling until late 2020, early 2021. Moving forward, Adrian's been working on collecting information for our greenhouse gas inventory, and we anticipate rolling that in to have a solid basis, snapshot, if you will, for where we're at with our greenhouse gases. That information, and ideally along with information from a risk vulnerability assessment, gets rolled into the conversation for visioning, goal, and target setting. And we'll definitely be looking for commission input on that. And when we, in closing, Adrian will come back and pose a couple questions to you all on that. The vulnerability assessment, risk assessment, this is something that, you combine it with the modeling and the conditions assessment. We should be able to get a really good picture of near-term and long-term projects to better position ourselves moving forward to protect our assets. And so having, this is just something I'd like you guys to think about, in having this strategy, there's some benefits in different areas that you might not just jump out at you. If we are to go looking for funding for some of these projects, having a plan, having a strategy is part and parcel to those applications. I sit in on a lot of different meetings around the country to learn what is happening, because sea level rise is starting to have an effect quicker out on the East Coast. And something I learned recently is that a lot of insurance companies and also bond rating agencies are asking various jurisdictions, what their plans and programs are. So that's something I'm not aware we've had those questions yet here at the port, but that is something that is definitely becoming more of a reality.
Hey, Kurt, if we can real quick, Tamara, are you on here, and can you comment as to whether our insurance company has asked about these things?
Yeah, I'm on here, and I have not had any questions posed regarding this at all.
Yeah, and that's hopefully due to we're a little behind on seeing some of the effects, but from what I'm hearing, it's something we could anticipate. So in moving forward, we'll obviously be continuing on with the energy efficiency projects that Adrian highlighted.
Hey, Kurt.
Yeah,
you said we're a little behind in seeing the effects. Would you expand on that?
Yeah, so the East Coast, for a variety of geologic factors and hurricanes and things, they're seeing more immediate effects of sea level rise right now. In Washington State, we're still in parts of the state still rebounding from the last ice age, and so there's some the land is actually still bouncing up from not having ice on top of it, and so that kind of counteracts some of it. So it varies. The effects vary because of all different kinds of ocean conditions and geology going on, and so we're a little bit behind compared to some of the eastern seaboard.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. So I think that's about all I had to say right now. Adrian, did you want to move on?
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. I think moving forward, we talk about what we're going to be doing in 2020, this next phase of visioning and starting to set goals as far as mitigation and adaptation goes. So we wanted to ask for your input and ask you how to do that. So whether we should be looking for more meetings with all of you together, whether you'd prefer to do it individually, or start to get that conversation going of how you would like to provide input, how you'd like to be involved, and open it up for any other questions or comments from our presentation as well.
So I have a question. Mm-hmm. Am I unmuted here? Yeah, I guess I am. What's our last 50 years of sea level rise in the Bellingham area been? Has that been recorded? Do we know what that is? So say we were at 50 years ago. Where are we at today? What have we risen? Is Kurt or yourself, do you have answer to that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna take a stab at we're in the 6 centimeter, inch range or something, with the prediction of things accelerating as more ice melts.
So we're in the 6-inch range, right? Say from 50 years ago.
6 centimeters, an inch plus right now is,
Okay.
I believe, but I'd like to double check that and get back to you with a more.
Can I pipe up as the Canadian here? The 6 centimeters is a little over 2 inches.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
2.54 per.
I was thinking an inch and a half. Yeah. So
Only we all went to metric.
Like,
Hey, Adrian, I would love to do this discussion in an open forum with all the commissioners. I believe that we should have this be an open discussion with the 3 of us.
mm-hmm.
So you asked the question. If I had a say in this, I would love to see all of us in the same room talking about these issues in an open dialogue forum.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would agree.
And it could be a work session, could be a good opportunity where we have that pre-meeting and have time to go over this. Public is welcome to participate, and we can have a in-depth conversation.
I agree with Michael.
So Kurt, I'd like to go back, continue my question about the last 50 years. We had call it 2.5 inches in the last 50 years, and we double that. We accelerate that rate by double in the next 100 years. Let's see, then 4, so we're going to have 10 inches to 12 inches of increase in water height in the next 100 years. Is that correct? Somewhere around there? Increase in sea level?
there we go. That's something we're going to be getting out of the modeling. And I guess I would caution against taking a simplistic view of that as a static level. The reason we're doing the modeling is because it brings in a variety of different atmospheric and conditions out in the water. So, you take a high tide event in August without any wind, and you compare that to an event with low atmospheric pressure, a bunch of rainfall, and a lot of wind building up, and it's going to have a much different effect, even though you're looking at the same sea level rise scenario as far as how much has it risen, and the predictions as to how many inches is changing a lot. But they're basically saying, right now by 2100 to be looking at 5-6 feet locally. So
I'm going to come back behind Bobby and say I understand the modeling thing. So I'd like to see the model and look at the data that goes behind it, because that's really an important component of this. So when we come to this meeting where we all three meet together, we all ought to be able to see the model you guys are using for your predictions and understand it in its entirety. Because if it's true, we need to respond, right?
And I'm not arguing it's not true. I was just trying to get a grasp on how we're getting there, which is, the model. But and I understand. I've seen that all my life. All the high winds, the floods, the water levels are up. I've seen it 20, 25, 30 years ago, where all of our floats were the wrong directions on the ramps. That was 30 years ago. So it comes and goes. I get all that. I was just looking for a baseline of okay, we don't have flooding, we don't have wind, we don't have this, we don't have that. Our baseline without any of that happening, what is that going to be in 100 years? I mean, you can make all these choices that make everything really big, but what is the baseline we have to work with, and how did we get there? So and I agree with Ken. We need all that information.
Yeah, and I would love to do it as a group. I think this open discussion is very valuable to all of us.
If we don't have the Cosmos model outputs, in a timely fashion for these conversations. The state of Washington does have the more static model right now that I can easily run through a variety of scenarios with commissioners to show and answer those exact questions, because you have to put in some different assumptions as far as greenhouse gas inputs and what percent likelihood of that event occurring. And so there's a little nuance to it, but we can get you those numbers.
Yeah, what I think is important is just get us those nuances, what those inputs are, and what the model is, so that we understand what we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
I don't want to come into this with just a bottom line number, right, and a bottom line figure. I want to understand the model. I want to understand the inputs. I want to understand the dynamics. Because quite frankly, if we've got a problem to deal with, we got to deal with it.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is kind of in preparation for this, maybe we can put together some scenarios that you could look at to help kind of educate and get your head around what we may be looking at.
You know, Kurt, you talked about a model. Mm-hmm. Understanding that model is key, because we're going to be basing our decisions on that model. Mm-hmm. So everything we need to know is in the model. What are the assumptions? What are the predictions? Where's the data coming from? Because again, like I said, if we can all agree on that, we've got to deal with it. And I think, you know, what the international data is showing is not a question of whether we have a problem, it's how severe the problem is. There's hundreds of people working on this around the world, and hundreds of people are working on it because the modeling is pretty complicated. It's pretty difficult. There's a lot of different variables that come to bear, but I think Kurt would be able to bring us some pretty good numbers that we're able to understand what are some of the different scenarios we can anticipate in our lifetime and in our children's lifetime that we're looking at. So we're able to have some useful inputs on what are those numbers going to be. But I think the trend is most of the numbers are continuing to accelerate. We're not really seeing a trend that new studies are coming out and saying, oh, actually, this isn't a problem at all. Or actually, we've got 500 years before we have to worry about that. We're typically seeing the opposite, is this is something that's coming sooner and that the consequences are more severe than previously anticipated. No, and don't misunderstand this. I understand that. I just need to know that if we're going to base our decisions on a model, we need to know what that model is, what the data is, what the inputs are, what the parameters are, so that we can come to the same conclusion. That really is my goal.
Great.
Yeah, if I make really quick, Commissioners, Brian Gower, Director of Environmental Planning Services, and yeah, the beauty of the model that Kurt is talking about is the Cosmos model builds on a number of other existing models. But the really cool part about it is that the USGS, U.S. Geologic Survey expert that is actually based out of Bellingham is doing this work, is local. And we've even discussed, and I think it would be worthwhile to have him come and discuss this a little bit with the commission. Sometimes it's pure science, so when he gets going, but it's really fascinating on one level. And then the other thing is just to keep in mind, we are not we're not a regulatory agency where we have a jurisdictional control over how we for permitting purposes. So the city of Bellingham and Whatcom County and others, they actually have to pick a number to regulate too. What we're trying to do is kind of find that middle ground of how do we plan for asset management and resiliency of port infrastructure. And this is just one of many discussions that we should have when we're making, capital improvement decisions. That, is there an opportunity to be a little bit more resilient because this model and this one scenario is showing this, but we're not going to be regulating to this, to a number here, but it is an informed decision that should be made. So we're happy to bring that to the work study. I think it'd be great.
And Brian, thank you for that. I'd love to have him be there, in the room. Really what I'm looking for is education more than anything. So if he could be there, that'd be great.
Yeah, Dr. Eric Grossman, he's He is also a teacher up at Western, so he's all about education. So
let's do this.
I guess I'd just one way of thinking about it is I think it's a natural tendency to want that number, right? What is the number we're planning for? But I think from what I've seen is a different way of looking at it would be, depending on the asset we're talking about and depending upon what level of risk the organization is willing to accept, how should we be planning? And so those are the tools that we're looking to bring forward, is so that you can make the best, most informed decision, eyes wide open, and think of it like, if you're looking at a park, that if you needed to come in and shore up the shoreline, but and raise the level, that's one thing. If you're looking at building a building that in all likelihood will be around for 100 years and is a significant asset, you may want to look at that with a different risk tolerance. And so what I'm hoping to do, and what we're hoping to do with the model and the tools, is so that when we come to you, and this has been kind of thought out, and we have a rationale as to how we're approaching a particular asset, Bellingham shipping terminal, cruise terminal, Zwanich Point, what have you, with a rationale of why we're looking at, planning a certain way. With that, obviously, as what Brian's saying, the city is our main shoreline jurisdiction. That's what will also drive, what we have to adhere to regulatory wise. And when they update their shoreline master program coming up, we'll be a big part of that conversation looking at this.
Thanks, Kurt. Hey, commissioners, just a quick time check that we're past the 5:30 public comment period. I'm hearing from all three commissioners they want to spend a lot more time on this one. So I'm going to get this on a future agenda. We'll bring the experts in and we'll be ready for a more robust conversation then.
Is that politely telling us we talk too much or what?
Thank you, everyone. That was very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for this. I'm really excited about learning more about this. So thanks.
Great.
Good. And before we close off this one, I just wanted to, for both Ken and Bobby, to invite you each to have a conversation with Pam Brady out at BP and hear what they're thinking about climate change, hear what they're thinking about carbon pricing and the way how this fits into their business plan, both as a local company and as a global company. I spent about an hour with her and their lobbyist who works in Olympia, just to hear how they are approaching carbon pricing and the potential of carbon pricing being at the state as a hot topic for the legislature this year. And for them, it was a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I heard two messages from Pam. One, they support carbon pricing. They want the predictability. They want that ability to plan how assets are, how they spend their money, where they spend their money, and how they plan for the future. They want that predictable model for the whole West Coast, seeing Oregon, BC, and California already having carbon pricing structures. They want Washington to be in the same mix. And the third is that they're looking to spend billions of dollars on projects that are put in place to offset the carbon that they produce. They realize that they're going to be producing carbon for a long time. And they really stress the business opportunities that exist for partners to work with them on storage of electricity, all different ways of producing alternative fuels, ways to mitigate or offset carbon in other ways. So they really painted this as a great business opportunity for organizations and municipalities to partner with them. So
hey, Michael,
I just wanted to bring that up as a good option for a conversation.
I promise you I will talk to Pam Brady.
Great.
I will do that.
Good.
I talk with Pam Brady all the time. She emails me quite often. And I'd like to point out at this point in time, and I said this a couple of years ago when Cherry Point came under attack, that people should sit back and realize and think about the fact that these people are going to be around for a long time. BP is going to be around for a long time. And they're the type of company that you want to align yourself with, because they're going to take us into the future of use of energy, and they're going to spend a lot of money to get us to clean energy because it's in their best interest. So we need to help them, not hinder them.
You got it.
So, thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
Sure.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, well, thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Kurt. I look forward to more conversation on this, and I'd certainly also like to have an update on our district energy and how district energy plans fit into our planning and what we can expect for that project to participate in some of these future efforts.
Michael, I'm gonna request two things. Can we take a break? Number one, and number two, can we come back with maybe some public comment, because the 5:30 time is upon us?
Yeah,
I can go to just without the camera.
Are you fidgeting all around without a reason, or what's going on?
Look, dude, I'm as old as you, so. Can we take 5?
Yeah, we'll take 5 minutes and then come back for public comment.
Thanks, sir.
Good.
Hey, John, I want to know why you wore the mask and then just took it off. Who was in the room?
Well, I walked out of my office during the break to go down to check on Holly on something with Holly since I had a couple minutes. So our rule here is that we wear the mask when you leave your office or if someone else is in your office. So I came back in and I neglected to take it off until I saw my face in the screen.
Oh.
You know, I'm getting so accustomed to the mask, I often forget to take it off. you just leave it on, and it's kind of second nature. It's better than wearing a tie, quite frankly.
Well, I'm here to tell you it's important. My son-in-law and I spent all day Sunday watching football games, and he tested positive this morning.
Well, that's what you said. Yeah.
So,
no, I mean,
I'm in a 10-day quarantine.
Well, I've been telling folks, I said, the problem is that we all got accustomed, and then we got lackadaisical under the little relaxation. Oh, we'll go out to dinner with just our son and daughter. We'll go, pick up an order from someplace to bring it home. And, how careful you were being in April and May and maybe June, kind of been lost going through Labor Day and anxiety to go do stuff.
Yeah, what's the harm of the Seahawk game?
So,
Come on,
Commissioner, I'm going to ask Commissioner Shepard to ask for the public comment and get away from the COVID conversation, just because I see a whole bunch of people unmuting their mics that wanted to comment on this.
You want to go home?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Rob, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Nobody signed up. No, sir.
Is there anyone here interested in providing public comment for us? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, we'll go back to talking about the Seahawks. No, sorry. I guess that puts us on to other business. Do my fellow commissioners have any other business? Commissioner Bell.
I have none.
All right. Commissioner Briscoe?
None today.
None today. All right. Well, I guess
Saving it up.
Rob's getting his wish. I don't have any either. So
I do want to make a comment on one thing, and that's the Bellingham situation, and that we will put that on the agenda for late in October. I sent you all some information either today or yesterday on that, and I'm going to have individual conversations with you over the next week or two, and then we'll prepare that for the agenda on the whatever 2 weeks from today is, 20th maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did have one question for Rob there. Is our pavilion bids, that going to be on next meeting's agenda?
That's correct. We'll be awarding that bid on the next meeting.
Okay, very good. That's all I had. Thanks.
All right. Sounds good. Looks like we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.